Hi, and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Darrell Slocum. He's the president of the Tuolumne County Business Council and also involved with public outreach for Central Sierra Connect and ATCA. Darrell, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's really great to have you on the show. I feel like it's been too long. I always have seen you as one of the more involved people in not just Calaveras County, but also Tuolumne County. And we're going to get into some interesting topics, broadband, the Butte fire, some of the impacts, the local economy. And but before we get into that, what is it about you that just gives you the drive to be so involved with so many local organizations and community activities?
You know, I think there are a lot of people like me in the community who have a heart, a passion for the community and want to give back. And the need certainly exists. So I think much of what motivates me is just trying to lend a hand and do what I can to help, bring things forward. That's the primary motivating factor. And because I got involved in that several years ago, I must have done a partly okay job because people keep asking me to do it. So I think that's part of what stimulates it is people, they get pretty good at recognizing who the assets are in the community and who you can count on to reach out and ask for help on certain things. And again, it's not limited to me. There are a lot of people in that category.
It's nice to get that affirmation. We'd like you to be president next year as well and keep coming back. So that's really nice to hear. Let's go back in time a little bit, and for those who don't know you, I want to make sure our viewers have a little bit of history. So take me all the way back to where you grew up, and then tell me how you got to where you are today.
Well, I actually grew up in Tuolumne County. I was not born there, but an interesting tidbit that I don't think I've ever shared with you before is that we moved to Tuolumne County because we couldn't afford to live in the Bay Area anymore. Yeah, my dad died, and my mom was on disability. And it was an inexpensive place to live. And that's kind of what brought us here. And I think that's significant because, again, that wasn't unique to us. There were a lot of people who moved up here for that very reason. And that was just before I entered school. So that was quite a number of years ago. And went through my primary schooling in Tuolumne County and then moved away and went to college and started a career. And like a lot of people, I really missed it. And when it came time to raise a family, I tried to find a way to get back here, and which isn't easy to do. I mean, I've seen a number of my classmates and peers who've tried to come back and just couldn't make it, because of a lack of a job or the right kind of job, etc. And that's unfortunate. And that's one of the things that we try to overcome with our activities is to create jobs and create a pathway for our young people who are finishing school, who either go away to college and want to come back, or maybe they don't have a desire to go to college and they want to go directly into the workforce. And so ideally we would have a better, more vibrant community that would allow our young people to do that. And that's one of the things that I'm working on in conjunction with a lot of other people. So I finally did have a chance to come back, and then I moved away again. A job took me away, and then I had a chance to come back again, and finally I think it kind of hit me that this is where I needed to be and this is where I wanted to be, so I needed to do what was necessary in order to stay here. And
what are some of the various jobs that you have worked in the foothills after coming back after college?
Well, for a long time I was the marketing director for Golden State Cellular, which was our CDMA or Verizon side carrier here, and I knew during that tenure that there was a good possibility that they were going to be acquired someday.
Which they now have been.
They have been, but I had an opportunity to leave them a couple of years before that happened, and I went to work for a tech company over in Sonora, and I was doing some things for them and traveling and trying to break them into a new market, and then they had a downsizing, and I was kind of put out of place on that. And then shortly after that, I landed in my current role, which is doing some marketing and outreach for Central Sierra Connect Broadband, which is an ATCA program. And ATCA, you mentioned earlier, is the Amador Tuolumne Community Action Agency. The largest nonprofit in the region. There's somewhat of a void in Calaveras County, and there's a long story there that I've been told a couple of times, but I don't know it well enough to recite it. But they do have certain programs that are active in Calaveras County, including our broadband outreach program, which is Central Sierra Connect.
Is it called Amador Tuolumne because it excludes Calaveras, or is that just is Calaveras part of that? It's not.
It's not.
It's not. That's really sad to me.
Yeah. The actual action agency component of the Amador Tuolumne County Action Agency excludes Calaveras County. And like I said, there is some historical reasons for why that transpired. But again, they're active. I can tell you that ATCA staff have been coming over and assisting on the Butte Fire, as have many other entities, but they're very involved in the Calaveras community.
Well, tell me a little bit about what ACTA is and what it is that they focus on.
They have a variety of programs in Tuolumne and Amador County, including they operate the food bank. They do the Friday Night Live program, which is an outreach program for youth. They facilitate and administer a number of programs, including I did some outreach for them earlier this year. They have a tax preparation program for low-income residents, and currently they are involved in the drought assistance program for Tuolumne County, which is assisting residents whose wells have been impaired or impacted by the drought.
And where does their funding come from?
It's a combination of things. It's much of it is funded through the state, but then there are a number of different grants and other programs that they put together to fund the various aspects of what they do. And again, like a lot of our nonprofits up here, they become very adept at working that grant process because it's so important to help overcome the gap we have in revenue, just the amount of dollars that are floating around in our region.
Now I know with CCWD, having a disadvantaged community gives you a huge leg up on the grant process. Do you know if ATCA can also take advantage of, since there are so many disadvantaged people here, are they more apt to be chosen for these grants?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the Tuolumne County, Amador County, and Calaveras County disadvantaged communities are citizens. There are a lot of counties that have people in that category, so it's not unique to us, even though we feel like it is because we live it every day. Yeah. So it's a competitive process, and so you have to be applying for the right grants and putting the right information in and really proving that the need exists. And ATCA has a terrific executive director, Shelley Hance, who's been there for a long time, and great support staff, and so they're really good at what they do. And part of that is working that grant system and going after things, and that's how they got involved in the broadband program, which is, you might think, why is a nonprofit entity like that's involved with the food bank and other programs doing with broadband outreach? And it's because they've got their feelers out there figuring out what the need is and how they can step in and fill it.
And is there quite a bit of flexibility in what they can pursue? They aren't really limited to a certain number of programs. So let's say another program came up and a grant was available, they could go after that and then they could put resources toward this new program?
If there's synergy there, if there's a fit, and if they have the kind of staffing that will help facilitate that. But in some instances, that's not even true because they can go out and get contractors, which is what they did with the drought program, where they've actually got people who go out and on site to do a site assessment and put a tank in and help plumb it to the well and those kind of things. So it's multifaceted, that's for sure.
And I want to talk about both those programs. But before we get to the drought assistance program and then broadband, everyone's talking about the Butte Fire right now, and not just in Calaveras County. You know, that also impacted Amador, and certainly Tuolumne is very involved as well. And I know that you have not been putting information out as an official PIO, but you and I both, living in the area, have followed it. And I just kind of wanted your thoughts on, one, how did something this devastating happen? What led to that? And then two, what are some impacts that you see from your perspective with your experience in these counties?
Well, I'm far from being an expert, but I think the how is pretty obvious. It's because of the severe drought conditions that we have and the tender nature of the fuels. I mean, it's just ripe for fire and to build on that. The frustrating part about why that happened, and this goes back to what you mentioned about the the regional aspect of what we do is that we experienced this in Tuolumne County with the rim fire a couple of years back. And what as devastating as that was, what you want to try to have, the good that comes from that is what can we do to minimize this happening in the future? And there really wasn't much we could do to prevent that happening. Now, some people would say that's because of the drought, and you can't make the drought go away, but there is a forest management element that is significant. And if you talk to the people who are experts, they'll tell you that. I've been up into the Stanislaus with foresters, and I've had them show me, you know, one side of the road that's been properly thinned and the other side that hasn't. And even to a layman like myself, it's pretty obvious which is the healthier part of the forest and which one is going to be more susceptible to fire. And so we've got to find a way to get the forest management effort fine-tuned so that they're doing a better job and getting to more parts of the forest, because that's the area that surrounds all of our communities for the most part, and typically that's often where the fire starts. And if we can't get it under control before it gets out of the forest, then our residences are going to be in danger.
You witnessed the rim fire very close hand, and have you seen any change in practice since then, which leads you to be optimistic that we may have learned some lessons, or have you seen little to no change? I've
seen none. In fact, what I've seen is frustration over the difficulty in just getting the salvage timber out of the forest. I mean, there was a significant amount of timber that could be harvested, and because of lawsuits and other issues, it just became way more difficult than it should have been to get that out. On the national forest land, the private lands, they immediately started hauling timber out of there, and to the tune of, I heard numbers of 200 loads a day were coming out of there. And in the national forest, it was a minimum of a year before they could even start looking at the permitting process to take the logs out of there. Beyond that, it's, again, no one disputes the cumulative impact poor forest management had on extending the fire, and yet that issue of accounting, where fighting a fire comes out of one fund and managing the forest comes out of another, still hasn't been addressed. So we can find the money to fight the fire, but we can't find the money to properly manage the forest to minimize the danger of the fire.
So we're looking at this problem in a reactive manner instead of a proactive manner.
We are, and there are long-term implications, and this is somewhat relevant to the Butte fire too. I just had someone telling me today about some economic issues in Tuolumne County, and some of the vendors were speculating that there is some residual impact from the rim fire of tourists. You know, we have a tourism-based economy, you know, falsely believing that our area is burned up. And part of that was unfortunately promoted by bad advertising on the part of the national media when the rim fire was taking place. Now we've got a chance to do it over again and maybe do a better job of overcoming that as it pertains to the Butte fire, because terribly devastating, you know, my heart just aches for the people who were impacted. But if you stop and think about it, most of the typical tourist areas of Calaveras County were for the most part not impacted. They're up and running and ready to do business, and so there's absolutely no reason for the tourists to stay away.
Right, so for example, Murphy's didn't burn, but it may have been mentioned on the news as being threatened, and I could see how that could be misconstrued. Let's take a step forward. We have about 500 homes or more that were burned. What are some economic impacts that you could foresee happening in the next couple of years here?
Well, prior to the economic downturn, we had a pretty vibrant construction industry in the region, not just in any one county. When the downturn hit, it hit construction, you know, significantly, and a lot of those individuals had to leave the county in order to find work elsewhere. It left us with a little bit of certainly a decreased labor force. Now we've already been seeing indications that the real estate market is starting to pick up, and usually in conjunction with that, you start to see an uptick in construction activity. Certainly that's been the case in Calaveras County. So now we're going to have a huge increase in construction activity as these properties get cleared and people start to rebuild their homes. We need to be thinking about where the personnel are going to come from to build those homes, because we don't have a ready labor force that's just sitting at home waiting. I mean, we have a lot of great constructions and trade people who are ready to step in and do their part, but I don't think there are enough of them to handle the workload. And we were talking in Tuolumne County about how it could potentially impact construction over there, because Tuolumne County contractors are going to be coming likely and working in Calaveras County because of the proximity.
So we had this exit of a lot of the contractors when the economy slowed so significantly. They really haven't come back because there isn't a big reason to yet. So we could have a bottleneck, you think? And what would happen? Would you think we might see a lot of out-of-county, far-away people coming in and taking some of that work?
Well, that's one potential downside. The potential upside is the apprentice program, where we get some contractors and they do some, on-the-job training and take some of our young people who are looking for jobs and teach them the trade. That's a positive benefit, but we have to be mindful of now what are we going to do with those individuals after they've learned the trade and the 500 plus homes have been reconstructed, and where's the work going to come from for them at that point?
And then that leads into that bigger picture, which is you're looking to create a community that's vibrant and that is attractive to businesses and residents, residential people who want to come and live here. And it seems as though that's a difficult balance to find in the foothills. What do you think it's going to take? And I know this doesn't just apply to any one county, but let's say that in this region, what do you think is the right blend to get us to a healthy economic place?
Well, that's a very pertinent question, and I'm going to answer it with what's going to seem like a really rudimentary answer. But I think the first step is deciding that we need a vibrant economy. It's taken for granted that there are people out there who are somewhat insulated, and I love our retirees and our equity refugees. They're a great part of our community, but in some ways, they're taken care of. They've got a pension, they've got money coming in, and they in some instances are not quite as interested in what's going on with the local economy. We all should be interested in what's happening in the local economy by looking at what's happening to our school enrollment, jobs leaving in the area, etc. So I think if we can decide collectively that it's important to have a strong economy, then it makes the path to finding a strong economy easier to get to.
And yet, if you have this older demographic, for the most part, who maybe are a little bit not so concerned about it, and you don't have a vibrant economy to attract the younger generation, you're ending up with this gap. And you don't have people who are young and excited and enthusiastic about creating this economy. So I think that makes a very challenging situation for what you're trying to do. And I don't know, I think maybe Tuolumne might be slightly better, and maybe part of that is some investment, some community investment in economic development. Your group, the council, but also the economic development. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of those two groups to that county?
I can, but before I do that, I'd like to address what you said because it's really critical. I think the part of the solution is outreach and education to that group, that their services are ultimately going to be determined by the strength of the economy. And by their services, I don't mean just having a nice restaurant to go to where you get superior service from your wait staff and you get the kind of food that you want. But our health care is directly tied to that. Our education program, many of the people in that category like to pursue higher education or education for a variety of reasons, and that's directly tied to our ability to hire the kind of people that are necessary to put forward those programs. So I think that education and outreach to that group, because again, it may sound like I'm being critical of them, I'm just admitting or acknowledging the fact that they are in a different category because they're not looking for jobs and they're not as aware of what the local economy is like. The difference between the economic development effort in some of our counties is that in the case of Tuolumne County, they were able to put together some funding for their JPA, their Joint Powers Authority between the city and the county, to allow them to go out and hire an actual trained economic development director, someone who had been doing that job in a larger metropolitan area. Larry Cope is that individual, and through that and the backing of the county and the city and putting together the right board to support his efforts, he's had a lot of success, and specifically he's been primarily successful at protecting existing businesses, including getting the SPI mill in Standard back up and running, and then filling some of the retail voids that existed in Tuolumne County. Calaveras County, who has Dave Jeffords, who I've been on the air with here talking about what they're trying to do. Some great people involved with that effort as well, but it's primarily a volunteer base. And unfortunately, when you have that kind of scenario, I think your ability to be effective is a little bit in jeopardy. And so that's kind of the difference between those two. And then I'd say with Tuolumne County, Larry certainly got some momentum going, and he's been able to build off of that.
And Calaveras, do you think that if we did have the consensus to actually fund a position similar to Larry's, do you think that that would allow us to get on track to have some of the successes that Tuolumne has had? Or do you think Calaveras is just completely different in that maybe we wouldn't be well suited for that type of development?
No, I don't think Calaveras is different at all. I think it just takes the right climate culturally, from being receptive to development, et cetera, to making that happen. I mean, Larry's successes have not been without struggle. I mean, some of what he's had to do, he's had to push for. And again, that's the benefit of having the right person in that position, because in some instances the businesses can't push for themselves, and so they need an advocate. They need an ambassador that can push for them in that manner. And I think Calaveras would benefit from having somebody like that as well.
Let's talk about the council that you presided over for the past 6 years as president. What would you say are the goals of that council, and how do you go about facilitating those goals?
Well, it's directly tied to what we're talking about. The Business Council is made up of employers and business owners in Tuolumne County, both large and small. I mean, we have everyone from the Sonora Regional Medical Center, which is the largest employer by far in the county, to sole proprietors in the council. And it's a business advocacy group. What every member of the council wants to see is they want to see a stronger, more vibrant economy and a climate and culture that is more receptive to business expansion because of how it benefits the overall economy. So what we do is, number one, we employ an executive director who has a development background, and he sits on and he's a member of the majority of the committees in the building industry and other county-related committees that are developing the plan and standards for the county, so that we have a voice and input on what's taking place there, and making sure that the business community is being heard. And it's been a good arrangement. There's been give and take, of course, and unfortunately, because there hasn't been as much activity of late, there hasn't been as many chances to see if the process is working. But we certainly think that we're poised for growth, the growth that we're all waiting for, that we can do it responsibly, because no one on the Business Council is interested in just rampant growth at all costs. We all live here because we want to be here. That's the interesting thing. Most of the people who own businesses over there could have placed the business elsewhere, just as with the owners of businesses in Calaveras County. There's typically a very specific reason for why they're here, and it's because they really, really want to be here. So the last thing they want to do is ruin their community.
We have 5 minutes left. Let's hear about broadband, how it affects Calaveras and the region. And I know you've been doing a lot of outreach for this effort. And I think it's more important than people realize. So let's tell the viewers about broadband.
Well, in my opinion, it's critically important because it impacts virtually every aspect of our life. So many of the features and benefits of existence are accessible by the internet, and in many instances, we're being pushed to the internet, meaning that's how people want you to access those features and benefits. And it impacts everything from economic development we're talking about. If you're trying to talk about recruiting a company to come to an area, it's one of the first things on their list is the availability of broadband. It impacts health and safety, telehealth and telemedicine, education. I mean, one of our limiting factors used to be that we lacked an institution of higher learning. You know, we've got the community college in Columbia, and we've got some activity here in Calaveras County through San Joaquin Delta, and Columbia's moving programs over here, which is great. But we kind of lacked that four-year university. Now with the prevalence of online education, that's mitigated if you have an adequate internet connection. Even water. You know, we've talked a lot about water the last few years and water conservation programs, et cetera. Those will be directly tied to technology as well, from the standpoint of remote monitoring equipment that allows us to turn a valve off at our home, you know, from a remote location without having to drive all the way back home, et cetera. I mean, there's virtually every aspect of that. We have some areas of our county that are well positioned, that have a very good internet connection, and that has been enhanced recently with the completion of the CVIN fiber project, which was a grant-funded program that ran through 18 counties, including Mariposa, Tuolumne, Calaveras, and Amador counties. But there are still pockets of neighborhoods and homes that don't have an adequate broadband connection, and so we're trying to work with our internet service providers to overcome those gaps as quickly as we can.
Where could people go to help you out in this effort?
Well, one of the things they can do is visit our website, which is centralsierraconnect.org, and there's a broadband mapping program on there where they can use that to tell us what their current situation is on broadband, and then they can communicate to us, they can send emails, they can ask us about any available internet service providers for the particular area that they live in, and we can try to help make that connection. Because we've got some great providers that are working hard every day to do what they can to fill the gap. It's just that on a larger scale is what we're looking for. We want more, better, faster, as you might imagine. The other thing is adoption. There are a lot of people in our area who can't afford to pay the asking rate of the broadband provider. Specifically, one of the more prominent providers in our area is Comcast. And their price for service is fairly high and higher than some people can afford. They do have discounted internet programs, but unfortunately the criteria right now is that the family has to have a child that qualifies for the school lunch program, which is limiting. We don't have that many people. We're excited that they're testing a senior program, a pilot program, at a couple of locations now, and we could really use that in our area because we think we have a lot of seniors that would probably be on the internet using it if it was more affordable for them.
Darrell, thank you for the wealth of information and for making the time. Encourage people to visit that site to learn more. And thanks for what you're doing for the community.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger.